We are bringing it back. Hey everybody, Alex here, and welcome to another video. Games I finished, The Return, and we're doing horror-themed Halloween-y stuff. So, if you've been hanging out since back in the day, I actually used to, in addition to doing pickup videos, do what games I finished in a month and give like a little, I don't want to say review, but kind of like an impressions thing, because I would only talk about them if I actually finished them. And in some instances, if I dropped a game, I'd explain why I dropped it or something along those lines. I always enjoyed doing that. And I will say with the 4 quarters, 4 games, 4 years series, I've really enjoyed doing that as well. I don't want to make it like a monthly thing because if I happen to beat, we'll say, 10 games in a month, and for perspective here, on this year I've already beaten 44 this year. It gets a little long in the tooth, and I already talk a lot to start. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to limit it to like 3 or 4 games, or at least games that have a common theme. So what better time to do it than with Spooky Month here in October? And as of this recording, I finished the last spooky game that I technically wanted to play through for the Halloween season. I'm coming in a little early, to be honest, but I've had enough horror, man. Like, it's actually been a little exhausting at this point, and because I did end up dropping a few games like Blood Rain, Fresh Bites, or whatever the 2D platformer one that Way Forward did. I ended up dropping that. Just, to me, it didn't handle well at all. But the standout game I dropped was actually Cursed Mountain, and that was after, I want to say, maybe 6 hours or so. The game itself is not scary. The game itself is very atmospheric. I could see at the time when it came out how it was a big deal and how people will have enjoyed it as a survival horror game on the Wii. But the fact that you can't save, you have to rely on infrequent checkpoints and waggle controls, and you actually have to use pointing and stuff to basically purify enemies, it got really old really fast, it got annoying, and it stopped being fun. So ultimately I dropped it. Story-wise, sounds really interesting though. I would dare say if you are interested in it, just look up a Let's Play or something or read a synopsis, because the story is honestly the only thing that kept me going. The voice acting is, I'm not gonna say it's bad, it's actually kind of in between, but it does that really, at least to me, annoying British drama in the 90s thing where they have people talking to soup cans so you know that they're thinking. But to me, it just sounded like the audio mixing was really bad until I realized, oh, he's talking to himself. Oh, he's thinking to himself. But anyway, onto the games I actually finished. First one right out the gate, Still Wakes the Deep. Still Wakes the Deep is from the Chinese Room. You may know them as the Amnesia guys, I think it's Machine for Pigs guys, and there was one other game they made that I can't entirely remember the name of. And this game did get a physical release on the PS5, and it was a bit rare for a while. I think it was a low print run because I originally had it on order at Target. Just because I think there was a deal at the time. I think it was a buy two get one. They ended up canceling it on me because they couldn't fulfill it, and I was like, okay, fine. Well, you know what? Whatever. I wait for reviews anyway. It wasn't coming out in October. It wasn't going to be in time. Blah 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 blah. And then everybody was saying, oh, you know, it's not really jump scares. It's not like the way Amnesia was. And this is where I personally get kind of annoyed with the way the YouTube landscape is when it comes to reviewing games. It's not everybody, but for the most part, I find that these reviews, when they do come out, and I know a bunch of people have said this before, they look for negatives, and then they harp on the negatives. It's not like Amnesia. It doesn't have any jump scares, but last year jump scares were dumb. So I don't know who to believe at this point. But a lot of folks were saying that this was not really pushing the envelope. It wasn't doing anything different than what the previous Chinese Room games had done. This, that, and the third. From a business perspective, as we have seen, as of this recording, the state of the game industry, I am sorry, you cannot take risks anymore. It is really unfortunate. I think it stifles creativity, to be perfectly honest. This game is a departure from their usual style, and I honestly think it works. So, Still Wakes the Deep, if you're probably looking up gameplay, unless I figure out how to do this myself, which I'm giving myself too much credit for that already. It kind of reminds me of The Abyss. Basically, you play as a character who has had some real life drama and ultimately takes a job on this oil rig, basically until things kind of calm down. And I'm not going to spoil it because they explain it all throughout the story. And supernatural hijinks ensue. And here's the cool part. It takes place off the shoreline of Scotland, and there actually are oil rigs off the shoreline of Scotland. That is like a legitimate industry over there. Everybody has heavy Scottish accents. And as somebody who grew up with a father originally from Egypt and is used to hearing Arabic as well as other very thick guttural accents, I had to turn on the freaking subtitles for this one. But fun thing is, there is a trophy to actually play the entire game in Scottish dialect, which I did not bother with that because I wouldn't know anything that was going on. But the voice acting is really good. The actors are great, and I think they captured enough of the slang that I know from interacting with a bunch of like Scottish clients and individuals throughout my lifetime. Subtitles do put it into quote-unquote plain English so you understand what something means, which is great. And a lot of people are going to play this game and initially just go, oh, it's a walking simulator with some jump scares. Yes and no. I would almost say it's more like a cinematic walking experience. The jump scares, truthfully, you really do see them coming. It's more like that unnerving sense of dread. Kind of more like a suspense, a psychological thriller. Like if you've ever watched The Abyss or The Thing, they actually don't show you what is going on. They let you deal with the stress everybody else is dealing with. And then they give you a payoff of a visual set piece, of a monster, or something like that. Just like the original Alien. You're getting stressed out based on how everybody else is interacting. And that's really how this game goes. There's a bunch of platforming and puzzle mechanics and everything else as you go through this oil rig, presumably to get off. And you interact with the surviving crew members, some of which don't make it, some of which do make it. And I believe there is an alternate ending. I really didn't bother with it, but honestly, it really surprised me how much fun I had with this game. And there really isn't much in terms of gameplay other than running around and hiding and whatnot, which is a typical Chinese room thing. But I think this game was far more cinematic than their previous entries. And the set piece of the rig is perfect. You're out in the middle of the ocean. There is nobody coming to help you. And it's one of those things where in films like Event Horizon, even the original Alien, you know, they send out a distress signal, a call for help, something like that. You as the viewer are already like, dude, nobody's fucking coming. And you kind of know that, but you still want to see the whole thing through because ultimately, while the main character is trying to survive and get off of the rig, he's basically trying to get back to the life that he ran away from at the beginning of the game, which I think is kind of cool. It's a very interesting game. It's been reprinted at this point. It's on Steam. I think it was on Game Pass at one point. It's a really fun adventure. It's not that long either. It's like 4 or 5 hours. If you're really good with some of the stealth stuff, maybe it'll take you a little bit less. But if you are a little, I'll say, not adverse, but like accents are a little difficult for you, turn on the subtitles. I personally hate turning on subtitles if I speak the language because I read it and I end up skipping cutscenes as opposed to listening to the performance. But in this case, I really had no choice. Now, coming off of that, I decided to go for a little bit of horror adjacent. Now, I'm going to sip my Diet Coke here. Some of you guys are already going to say, Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden is not a fucking Halloween horror spooky game. It's fucking Ghostbusters in the Puritan times and colonialism. That's what it is. And by my definition, Ghostbusters has ghosts, Banishers has ghosts. Ghosts are associated with Halloween. And therefore, we are having Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden count as a spooky game for October. Now, this is an action RPG from Dontnod. You may know them as the guys from Life is Strange, as well as Vampire, which was their first foray into, I think that's how you pronounce it, into action RPGs. And that's Vampire with a Y, by the way. In that game, you play as a character who is a doctor, a very well-esteemed doctor who somehow becomes a vampire, and now he has to struggle with the moral dilemma of trying to save lives, but also having to take lives so he can survive. Typical don't nod, you gotta pick between two things. And in this game, it really does follow suit, but to the detriment of that mechanic, and this is no spoiler because it happens within the first like 30 minutes of the game. Actually, pretty much during the tutorial. Your main character, Red McCree, and his partner are basically tasked to go to, I forgot what part of New England it is, but basically you're in New England. I think it's around Boston, Salem, it's around that area. Rhode Island, Massachusetts, somewhere around there. Basically to rid them of a curse because they're banishers and their job is to banish ghosts. That is essentially it. And the way they do so is by way of two ways. They either ascend them, meaning that, they send them up to presumably heaven in peace, or they banish them to some sort of strange ghost purgatory, which they don't know where that is, but they're perfectly fine with doing it. And that's where your moral dilemma comes in, because you can choose to ascend or banish, or in some instances punish, meaning you're actually going to myrtleize the person that has caused this ghost to come into existence. And the way this works, and I'm just going to give you the first instance here because it is basically where the story kicks off. Your partner's mentor is actually haunting his not his ex-wife, his wife. He died on a mission, and he feels basically compelled to protect his wife. And when a ghost haunts somebody, they actually suck up their life essence. And it kind of does this thing where they start to go a little stir crazy. And in her instance, she tells you right off the bat, I still see my husband. They go to where he's buried. They find something that ties him to the world, and then they summon him and they have a conversation with him, and he tells them about this crazy wackadoo case he was on and that he never finished it, and the reason why he is still here is because he has to finish that case and he wants to protect his wife, and that's why he's haunting her. Obviously, he gets sent away. You're given a choice because Don't Nod has you give a choice, whatever. But in pursuing this nightmare, which is basically an alpha ghost, your partner dies. And now they are tied to you. They are haunting you as a banisher. And as a banisher, you're dealt with the moral dilemma of being haunted by a ghost of which you're supposed to get rid of. But your partner is also your lover. So there is a very interesting relationship mechanic going on there as well. It's very interesting. And it's really fun because the dialogue in Don't Nod games tends to be really good, as well as some of the banter back and forth that the two of them share. It's really, really great performing. The side quests deal with more ghost hunting stories. Basically, you go from town to town, banishing ghosts, presumably to eventually get to the big bad. Now, the action RPG aspect, basically they put you in an arena, you get surrounded by ghosts, and you have to change between the two characters, the ghost and the astral and the physical character, because some ghosts can only be hit by physical attacks, and some instances they can only be hit by spiritual attacks. And you level up each character individually, but they share a tree. Now, where this has a little bit of a problem where I got kind of annoyed, the ghost stories, which are basically cases, you are given an instance, like one example, you deal with somebody who died. He was actually murdered, but he was murdered because this individual was trying to protect her sister from getting an STD from this guy, because at the time syphilis was running rampant. Very historically accurate here, because, and you could, when you see the guy, you're literally like, oh yeah, man, he has syphilis. And he sees no problem with it. Absolutely. So at that point, when you've solved the case, you have to decide either you ascend him because ultimately he's not the bad guy, you banish him because he is the bad guy, or you blame the individual who caused this ghost to become a haunting ghost. And therein is the problem. In the main story, this is, again, isn't a spoiler, they tell you right from the get-go, you're given a choice. You can eventually banish your love interest, you can ascend your love interest, you can ascend your love interest, or you can resurrect your love interest. How does that happen? Apparently there's some forbidden magic, or as I like to call it, space love magic, where if you sacrifice enough colonists, basically blaming as many colonists as you can, you can resurrect your love interest and presumably have a happy ending. Great. That's wonderful. The side quests are scattered around, which is fine. And that's also, you have to search them out. And that's also how you get the skill points to level up your ghost partner. Why would you do that? Basically, because you want them to experience the ghost and get some more backstory and all that fun stuff. That's great. But then why would you put all the physical abilities behind some of the ghost abilities? I mean, you basically have to go out and look for side quests and hope that you eventually get enough points, because at the end of the game, when I finished it, I think I had only done 3 or 4 different side quests, and I ended up with extraneous physical skill points because I couldn't find any more that I wanted to do. I wasn't interested, and I was towards the end of the game. Basically missing a huge chunk of the story, of the decision making, of that excellent dialogue and morality that Don't Nod games typically have. That being said, still took me over 25 hours. The story is really good. The main story is really freaking good. And it's one of those push-pull things where you're like, yeah, I should really do some side quests. But I really want to know what happens over here. And then you keep going. And then you're like, oh man, that ended on a cliffhanger. Yeah, I'm going to keep going. And then all of a sudden you finish the game. But the overall story, the way everything ties together, is absolutely excellent. I did not see it coming originally until maybe I'll say the 80% mark. And I was like, oh dear. And is it 100% historically accurate? No. But having studied this in school, a bunch of the stuff, I was like, oh yeah, that was a thing back then. I mean, even my wife was like, oh yeah, that was a thing back then. It's fucked up. Really excellent game overall. But I would say if you want to get the most bang for your buck out of this, you got to do all that side content. I didn't do it, and I still had a great time, but I know if I went about doing all of it, I probably would have had a much better time. The individual side quest stories, for the most part, were pretty good. And when I say were pretty good, you already know, depending on what you want to do, if you want to resurrect your partner or not, you kind of already made your decision as to what you're going to do with the side quest, so that kind of takes away from it. I almost wish they didn't tell you that from the get-go, and it was like a silent or a hidden point generator based on who you ascended, banished, and blamed, so that way you didn't actually know towards the end if the resurrection spell would work. And ultimately, it really is just that. It says, do the thing or not do the thing, and then that's it. But the stakes, are definitely high in this game, and I think overall, from a performing aspect of it with the motion capture and everything, it's all excellent. Combat's a little hit or miss, to be fair, but once you get like that skill setup you really like, even me who didn't have all the ghost abilities, I basically just found like this really cool rotation where I would do a punch with the ghost, which would refill my rifle. I'd shoot with the rifle, and it would have an automatic critical hit. Switch back to the ghost punch. It would reload the rifle without me having to do so, because these are traditional muskets. You gotta do the whole. I just realized what that hand motion looked like, but you know what I mean. You have to take the stick and put in the powder and put in the balls. And anyway, moving on. Dusk, Dusk, a first-person boomer shooter. This game is nuts, man. It is a set. This came out several years ago, and I truthfully did not dig into the story that much. I just felt like playing some over-the-top boomer shooter action a la Doom. This game does not disappoint. It plays great on the Switch. It has gyro controls. I was going to play it on the PC, but between work and just doing stuff before work for like real life stuff and all these other things like trying to edit podcasts, I didn't want to sit at a PC anymore. So I decided, let me play this on the Switch. It's soaking up a gig anyway. May as well finish it and delete it. And I could not put this game down. It is so much fun. It is so ridiculous. It is so over the top. And it is all the better for it. It is that classic Doom, as in, shareware, Doom 2, mechanics, gameplay, all that. There's no aiming up. There's no aiming down. There's enough auto-aim where basically you just point the gun and it shoots the thing. And you got to strafe around entire arenas filled with endless dudes. And the weapons are varied. You get a crossbow that flies through different enemies. Of course, you get like a shotgun. You get a super shotgun, which is a zombie's natural born weakness. You get pistols. You get 2 sickles. Oh, it's so much fun. And there actually is a story, believe it or not. And it doesn't really tell you anything because basically you wake up and you're stuck in the middle of this cult in this town called Dusk. And as you go through the different episodes, you find out about this whole big conspiracy and experimentation and everything else, presumably to summon some big bad demon dude. And ultimately, it's not really a spoiler. You're trying to get out, essentially. And I don't know if there's any alternate endings or whatnot, but I can tell you this. This game does 3 things that I think are to its benefit. 1, it's highly customizable. You can make it look as pixelated as you want. You can clean it up as much as you want. 2, you can change the difficulty on the fly. And the reason why I say that is a good thing, because episode 3, there's 3 episodes. The second to last level of episode 3, you have to beat 270 guys in waves of 80. That is hard. And I was playing on hard because I thought I was being Mr. Fancy Pants, and I had to change it to normal because I just could not keep up. It gives you tons of ammo, it gives you tons of opportunities to get health back, it gives you every tool you need, but ultimately it's just too many dudes. And then once you beat it, the big bad guy comes over like through a voiceover and goes like, "Well done." I'm like, oh yeah, fuck yes, never doing that again. It's not that long. It's like 6 hours or so, but it is more so geared towards exploration. Basically, the more you explore, the more secrets you get, the more benefits you get, the more weapons, the more ammo, all that stuff. But the fun thing is, the third thing I really like about it is when you finish it, when you finish a level, it tells you how long the level took, how long you've been playing, and the developer time if you're interested in speedrunning, which you can. There's some levels that took me 20 minutes. It says dev time, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. I'm like, how? Unless you know where everything is. But, you know, I've watched some people do speedrun levels, and it's really addictive to watch, truthfully. This game is very fast. It doesn't hold back any punches, doesn't hold back any bullets, haha. And it basically does what it set out to do. Be a cult-driven Doom game made in the year 2000 and change. And also has heavy metal soundtrack, so you can't go wrong with that. Overall, absolutely excellent. I did have it physically on the PS4 at one point, and I got rid of it because I'm like, I'm never going to play this on a handheld or a console. Hindsight's 2020. And the last game I finished, as of last night, Splatterhouse 2010 on the PS3. Oh, what can I say about this game? It's not good. It is probably the biggest hunk of shit I have played in recent memory, and I really finished it because of the soundtrack and because I wanted to unlock all of the original Splatterhouses, and because at that point I was too far gone to want to drop it. And I'm going to back up a little bit. It has the guts of a good game. It has a lot of redeeming qualities that are held back by, and here it is, I'm going to date it, Unreal fucking Engine 3. Rick handles like a brick shithouse. His jump is either super high or it doesn't exist. The music is good. The battles, the fights, you'll basically get 2 special abilities called Splatter Slash and Splatter Smash, and you're just going to do that over and over again. You gather blood, you level up stuff. I recommend maxing out your health because after that it gives you a defense boost and nobody can hurt you anymore. And you also can pick up weapons just like the original game, shotguns, which I only saw once, bladed stuff, clubs, pipes, all that stuff. And honestly, it's a very grotesque game. If you're grossed out by excessive gore, that really turns you off. Don't bother. There's one enemy literally where you basically pull out his sphincter. Like, I'm just gonna come out and tell you, if that's not your jam, take it out of your cart. Don't look up gameplay. The voice acting is really good. The guy who voices the Terror Mask, I forgot his name, but basically it's Pete from Mickey Mouse. He's really good, and the chapters are narrated by the movie guy. You know, the In a Land Devoid of Fun or something like that. It's that guy. So it very much delves into that horror slasher film buff stuff. That part is good. The gameplay, though, I was originally excited for the side-scrolling bits because that's what Splatterhouse was originally. And then once I realized that Rick's jump is like 3 inches, and if you basically when you jump, you can't jump straight up and then inch forward. You have to have momentum, because there's so many times I would like inch to a cliff and then go for the jump, and Rick would literally just go straight down. And there are tons of load times, and it gets old really, really fast, because while there are tons of checkpoints, much better than Cursed Mountain, sometimes to get to that checkpoint, you have to fight a lot of stuff. You have to do some terrible platforming. You have to do some quick time events that aren't even dictated to you until it's too late. Case in point, there's one instance where you have to jump towards a building. Apparently there's a ledge to grab. Doesn't tell you that. It tells you after you're halfway in the air thinking you can make the jump, and it's like hit X to grab, and then all of a sudden you just fall to your death. And then you have to deal with a 45-second load screen. It's awful. I played on the PS3, so I really can't speak to the Xbox 360. And of course, this game ends on a cliffhanger, and this game was made in 2010, so I don't know about you guys. I don't think we're getting the sequel. I don't think this game did too good. It didn't review that well, actually, and I don't even know who the developer is. I usually look that stuff up, but if this must have been their first game, because there's a bunch of stuff in here I'm like, how is this still a thing in 2010? 2006, I would totally get, but 2010, I was like, I don't know. This seems like a first outing. But the soundtrack, though, now mind you, I have to preface this. Rick is wearing a Mastodon shirt. I truthfully cannot stand Mastodon. Mastodon is on the soundtrack. They pick some good damn Mastodon songs. That part of the heavy metal soundtrack I thought was really cool. There is one thing I do want to point out. There are collectibles. You collect pieces of photos of your girlfriend. They're risque. Basically, they're going for the teenage slasher thing. You can put 2 and 2 together if you're a horror movie guy or gal. I personally didn't bother to seek them out. I thought, truthfully, maybe it's my age talking, I thought it was kind of juvenile. And it kind of is. And I feel like that's really what this game is. It's kind of built to appeal to horny teenagers. Just like Friday the 13th. But, you see that? Got dad jokes all over the place today. See, this is where I'm talking about. The game itself isn't good, but there's actually a lot of good stuff about it. It's a little expensive because it does have, from what I understand, decent ports of Splatterhouse 1, 2, and 3, which I now have unlocked, and now I can legitimately say I own Splatterhouse 2 and 3, because I ain't paying that fucking money. But I don't think this is necessarily a game that you should drop a ton of money on to just get those, to be honest. I got this years and years and years ago before all this stupidity happened with collecting. But, because you literally have to get through 75% of the game to get all 3 unlocked. You get Splatterhouse 1, I think, after the 2nd chapter. You get Splatterhouse 2 after, I think, the 5th. And then you get Splatterhouse 3 after the 8th, and there's 10 chapters. And Chapter 10 is just the final boss fight. I don't know how to get the alternate ending. I know there's a second one. I don't know how to get to it. I don't care to figure it out. Pretty much when I finished this game, I literally just went on Discord and was like, it's done. This game is held together by chewing gum. And this has already been chewing gum. It is inherently not a good game. It just has a lot of things in it that make it mindless fun. And that's where I think it kind of excels. So, those were all the horror games that I decided I was going to play in October. I was thinking about maybe squeezing in one more. But at this point, I only got a couple more days until Halloween. And honestly, I'm ready to play something else. I think I've had enough of ghosts and goblins and demons and blood and guts and gore for a minute. Also watched The Phone, or The Black Phone, or whatever it is, the movie with Ethan Hawke. It's based on a short story by Stephen King's son. Really good movie. Midlife Crisis Media recommended that, and my wife and I watched it, and we thought it was pretty good. I had no idea that it was a movie. I only heard about the short story, and I never read it. But anyway, yeah, I'm definitely going to bring this series back. Like I said, it's not going to be a monthly thing. I just like talking about games, and I know a lot of you guys like to hear me ramble about games from time to time. So as opposed to me just doing pickups and talking about, other stuff, I thought maybe this would be fun to throw in there every once in a while. That being said, I do have another remakes and replays coming up in the future. Obviously, Spooky month kind of took over, But I already picked out a bunch of games that I want to do for that, and I'm hoping to get at least 1 or 2 of them wrapped up before the end of this year. Anyway, I've been Alex, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Take care.